Bloodlines, Chupacabra, by Kate Huddleston Gallipo. Copyrights 2019 to 2025. Based on the original script and screenplay Chupacabra and Chupacabra Return of the Beast. Prologue. Here we find ourselves in the desolate, literal middle of nowhere, and that's how we sometimes want it when we're on vacation, right? A place to just lay about on a remote island or isolated location, with not another soul in sight. So what could go wrong? Humans have long sought respite from the daily grind of life in the years since upon discovering the joy and ease of getting away from it all. Yet for all of the vacations, drunken cruises, and even yoga retreats, do we ever really find it as relaxing as we thought we would? Or are we just fooling ourselves with the illusion of these so-called escapes? Maybe you do find yourself in a relaxed state and return home feeling a renewed sense of self, a calm inner peace, or in another experience altogether. Through it all, each individual feels their own spiritual respite, and with the hope and sense of what they brought back with them is everlasting in some way. And a few do, while others return to their stressful routines once again, and carrying on with that getaway, a distant memory. Though for some it is a far darker feeling, a shadowy world that lies beyond our own. And when these few who return with them, something less renewed and far more sinister has followed them home. Really though, who are we to think that we are all alone in the world, and what walks in the shadows has always been there, watching and lying in wait for the right moment, just when you feel safe? How egotistical can we really be? I guess we will find out, won't we? Chapter 1. It's just camping, right? Hello, and how are you this evening? I am just fine, thank you for asking. Do you want to hear a story, or is the pull of social media so strong that you glued to the screen on your phone, draining your mind and exhausting you? Well then, if you'd rather indulge in a few tales, I have one for you, and hope that you enjoy it, or at least to some degree. Would you like to meet the 4 people on a hiking adventure, far from home, on a hike into a wild and untamed vast wilderness? 1 man and 2 women who have chosen to escape from the cities and town, where the stressful hustle and bustle of their lives get left behind, to seek the peace and solace held within nature. These 4 are backpacking into the desert in the heart of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Their guide is a well-seasoned veteran ranger who knows the trails that wind through these mountains to the place where they will be camping like the back of his hand. The start of the journey has begun, as the 3 people approach the park station. Leaving their cars parked along the individual lines within a small lot, they stand at the front door, waiting for their guide. They are anticipating a fun and relaxed event, 1 woman spotting a platform holding up her phone, snapping pictures of the mountains in the background, as the lush green pine-covered valley expands so far that it fades into the mountains, almost disappearing into a blur of green and gray. The ranger parks his truck with a trailer in tow behind the station. As he exits his truck, he sighs, taking in a deep breath, filling his nostrils with the scent of earth and pine. It is here he truly feels that he is at home. Embraced with familiarity, he's calm. Larry sees the 3 eager campers standing on the platform. He notices that all 3 are enveloped in the intense scene around them, completely distracted. They don't even notice that he's there, as he clears his throat, announcing his presence to the group. The ranger, a 65-year-old retired park ranger, has decided to come out of retirement doing what he loves best, after his wife of 35 years passed away from a long, courageous battle with cancer. Feeling the urge to get back out into the world, he asked for his old job back and was more than happy to be back to lead new groups of vacationers through the twisting, dusty, winding, sparse pine and scrub brush-covered trails. He decides to reach in the back of his pocket, pulling out an old pocket watch that had once belonged to his father and left behind with a secret. He pops open a compartment within the watch, revealing a picture of his recently deceased wife, Roberta. He quickly places the watch back into it just before heading inside of the small ranger station, a tiny outpost just on the edge of the park. As the 3 people that have arrived for their guided tour hiking into the desert approach the small building, he grabs his gear, a medical kit and a walkie-talkie, before closing and locking the door of his ranger's post behind him. He then heads around the back and pulls his truck up front. As he backs up, the 3 campers are waiting by the door to the station. This man, the guide, is a slightly overweight, balding man with horn-rimmed glasses. His name is Larry Whitfield. As he parks the truck, he gets out and heads towards the back of the trailer, opening the doors and heads inside. As he backs up out of the trailer slowly, he's holding a lead with a brown, flea-bitten chestnut mare at the other end. An old mare named Biddy. She is a well-seasoned trail horse that he borrowed from a friend specifically for this venture. Biddy would be carrying a few supplies too heavy for anyone to drag along with them along a 2.5-mile hike. The old mare, too, knew these trails or area quite well, as Larry saddled her up and loading a few more satchels onto the back and another attached to the pommel, he walked over to his new group of eager city dwellers. As the three campers approach their guide, greeting one another and waiting to set off, one of the campers walks over to Biddy, patting her neck and talking in a calm, lucid voice. The old mare nickered softly, basking in the attention given. She was a wise old mare, and once Larry had finished loading her up, she caught the scent of pine, making her anxious and impatient, as she raised her right leg, lifting her hoof up off the ground, then pawing at the ground several times, impatiently ready to go. Larry calmed her, then giving her a sugar cube, set off to talk to his group before heading down the trails. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Ranger Larry Whitfield, and I'll be leading you on this excursion to a secured location specifically for our 2 days out in the valley. Just there beyond that snow-capped mountain you see just behind me. That is Slide Mountain, he says, pointing towards the iconic skyline, with the mountains bathed in sunlight, giving it the appearance as if it were glowing as the light hits its snow-capped peaks. Larry then pointing in the opposite direction. That over there is Lake Washoe, and as we pass through this section here, you can get an even better view of the mountain. They stop at a small field filled with wildflowers after having been in the dense forest. There is a mile marker and sign stating that there is an overlook, which leads them to a path with the trees giving way to a cliff ledge that gives them breathtaking view. The three campers stood on a viewing platform, taking in the scene and staring in awe of the beautiful surrounding in which they found themselves. Now I have a few things to go over before we start down the trail. First, it will take about 2 hours. I do have supplies like water and a medical kit just in case. Also, I do carry a long-range military walkie-talkie in case of an event as such. If there is need for rescue or injury, that can happen. As things along the trail can get a bit rough, this terrain is as harsh as it is beautiful, so keep that in mind. The three campers, nodding in agreement as they listen to the old ranger, continues to give points on safety. You will notice that there are no cell phone towers around, so no network signals will be able to be sent or received, as he gestures to the landscape. This is why I have a standard long-range military-issued device as such. He looks at each individual, then asks, "All right, if you all would like to introduce yourselves, please do, then we will be off on our journey down the trail. I am pretty excited and I hope that you'll enjoy this as much as I do." A woman with red hair and freckled face steps up to be the first to introduce herself. "Hi, my name is Sandra McCoy. I am from Madison, Wisconsin, and I am an ER nurse. I was actually on a tour before this over in Yellowstone, then the Grand Canyon, when a couple that I met there told me about this tour, so I thought, why not, and here I am." Sandra McCoy, a 30-year-old nurse, our first camper, was, as we mentioned, an ER nurse who had been taking a break from her stressful job, needing to refresh and relax after suffering a bit of burnout, and taking advice from both her therapist and her mother, decided it was a good idea and felt pretty good to be on another adventure. "So, if you don't mind me asking, Ranger Whitfield, are there snakes on this trail? Just because I am really not a big fan. I mean, I really am quite terrified of them." Larry studied her face, then replied, "Oh yes, Miss McCoy, there are a variety, so if you're skittish, my suggestion is to keep to the trail. We hardly ever see any, but the occasional wanderer does slither along the trail. In case there happens to be the odd reptile, I will warn you in advance, though they are more scared of us and usually just slither on into the underbrush." Sandra's face felt flushed as she had felt slightly embarrassed. "Thank you, I really do appreciate that. I just can't stand the little legless buggers." "Folks," Larry spoke up with a warning, "I will caution you all that there are wild animals in these hills. Sometimes a few mountain lions will be in the area. We can usually avoid them, if they're hungry and we're within the vicinity, though they usually don't bother people, which is why we are to stay on the trail." Another camper ready for this hike and looking rather dream was Laura Gray. Thanks for that warning as well, said Laura. Yeah, I'm not a fan of those nasty, squirmy slithers either. Had a bad experience as a kid when my cousin dropped a garter snake down my shirt during a family reunion. Sandra looked pale as Laura recanted her memory. I would have slapped the shit out of that kid, no offense, says Sandra. Laura laughed and said, no offense taken, and I eventually got me revenge. Good, said Sandra as she looked at Laura and smiled. Laura Gray was a 34-year-old strawberry blonde with green eyes that hailed from Seattle, Washington, is also on this tour. Laura is a finance expert who joined this tour after a rather bad breakup with a cheating boyfriend. Her friends had suggested she get out and try again, but feeling rather like finding herself instead of looking to jump into another relationship. She took the advice of her minister from her local Presbyterian church she attended since she had been a small child. The two women seemed to be getting off to a good start as the third and final camper introduced himself. Cal Newitt, a 42-year-old ex-Marine and father of 4, had just retired after another tour through Afghanistan. He had a wife Ramona and 3 beautiful daughters, with a 4th child on the way. Cal needed a getaway after having spent years in the military, and before he settled down into civilian life, with his wife being supportive, agreed that he needed a little downtime before their 4th child, a boy, would arrive later that year. Cal, a strong blonde-haired, hazel-eyed, bulky ex-Marine, with a reddish-tan skin tone from being out in the desert a bit, weathered but obviously very skilled, as he had enough trained and knew about the area a bit. Well, Cal said, just keep in mind that your water bottle is your best friend, and caution means life or death out here. I have heard of many an adventurer and amateurs heading out into this place, never to be seen or heard from again. Larry's eyes met Cal's. This guy definitely had a lot of time and dangerous places tucked into his belt, and Larry was glad to have him on this camping trip. Alrighty then, that's really good to know. How do you know so much about this place anyway? Asks Sandra. Military training, says Cal. I always researched the areas within the countries I was being deployed to. I figured better to know than not, and it usually paid off, says Cal. Glad to have you with us, says Larry. Cal nods, and then as they finish their greeting and introductions, Larry speaks up. All right, folks, are you ready? Well, let's do this. But before that, I would like a volunteer to lead old Biddy here. If one of you doesn't mind, I will lead in front, with 2 in between, with the 3rd holding her in caboose. Laura raises her hand and steps in, taking Biddy's reins and leading her forward, as the group head towards the gate that opens to the trails. All 4 people, horse in tow, head down through the path down to the gate, as Larry unlocks the chains, allowing the 3 of them to pass beyond the barrier between civilization and unknown. He remembers to lock the gate behind them, as no one else, aside from the 4 of them, have the park's permission. He then walks forward to the front of the line and begins to give the campers some small history lessons about the area and a few pointers about where they'd be going. A few steps in, and Laura, mistaking a small branch for a snake, lets out a squeal. Biddy, the old flea-bitten chestnut mare, not amused, doesn't spook easily. Wondering what had Laura so jumpy, Sandra asks her if she needs a break, as they are now about a 4th of the way in. Laura, red-faced with embarrassment, assures her camping companion that all is well. She just thought a branch had tried to attack her, poking fun of herself. As these 4 campers trek even deeper into the woods, they are soon met with a sparse landscape as trees give way to a serene, ethereal, snow-capped, stunning mountain view. In awe of the breathtaking sight, the 4 of them stop for a break, breathing in the cooler temps coming off of the mountain breeze. The sun was still high, it was only around noon by this time, and they sat eating a quick lunch before packing back up and heading back down to the bottom of the mountain range. With the sun now behind them, beating down upon their backs with the cooler air now gone and the heat rising as the scrub brush and sand met their feet, there wasn't much vegetation aside from a few scrawny pine trees that grew further in the distance as they started the last leg of the trip down to their campsite. Scrub pines and literal tumbleweeds with a few succulents that somehow inhabited the harsh environment managed to thrive are all that they see. It was now around 3 p.m. when they finally reached a large boulder that marked the last quarter mile. The sun was growing hotter, and the 4 took another water break before they finally reached their destination. Larry quickly helps as the four finally drop their heavy burden unloading the supplies they have brought with them from within their backpacks. Larry continues unloading supplies, setting up small pop-up tents per person so they'd have plenty of privacy. It was only a 2-day stay after all. Larry and Cal had started to dig a small 3x3 and 12-inch deep hole for the fire that would warm them during the night. Cal gathered a few small rocks to line around the dig to keep the fire contained as well as mark it out in case anyone happened to drink too much and trip. Cal also created a small barrier for extra precaution by setting up the over-fire grill kit for Larry. Larry had planned to prepare a scrumptious and hearty meal for the group, having brought the supplies along attached to the mare in a sack he'd attached to the pommel earlier. Deserts can get mighty cold, and they would need a big fire to stay warm, as it could get to near freezing temps, even as hot as it was during their hike down that afternoon. Larry had brought a few small portable propane-fueled heaters, just in case the fire went out during the night. As soon as everyone was settled, the sun, now setting low, started to sink behind the mountains, giving a soft magenta and pink-orange hue in the distance, which Larry had earlier pointed out was called Slide Mountain, famous for its rock slides. Laura, after unloading Biddy and hitching her to a post that Larry had hammered in on the back behind his tent, near a rather out-of-place large boulder, about 12 feet away, giving them space so he wouldn't be trampled in case she did startle in the middle of the night. Laura sat down in her folding chair, bending slightly forward, grabbing her rucksack off of the ground, and reaching inside, only to pull out a bag of cocoa and s'mores supplies, much to the group's delight. Cal had helped Larry with the fire, that was now blazing as the sun started to set, hiving off the illusion of shadows from the light, as the flames flickered and danced across the lonely and cold desert floor. Larry had finished preparing and cooking dinner for the four of them, and settled back into his folding chair, ready to dig in. Dinner was an open grill with a side griddle placed right over the fire. The meal consisted of red pepper grilled chicken with roasted potatoes and a kettle full of chili that was hung on a swing arm simmered over the open flames. With everyone happily taking seconds and complimenting the chef on his delicious meal, slowly each letting out a sigh as they had filled their bellies and started to relax. Sandra had been the one who pulled out a bottle of wine that she'd brought along, offering it to the group as she poured a very generous amount into her red solo cup. While Larry had a small flask of oak-aged 150-year-old Scotch, his great-grandfather's in fact, that he had brought with him when he had emigrated, and a few bottles that had passed down through the family, this being the last one. Cal preferred the Scotch. He wasn't much of a wine guy, though the ladies were, as they celebrated tapping each red solo cup and laughing while engaged into a deep conversation among the two of them. Once everyone had eaten, Larry cleaned up the leftovers, placing them inside of his tent, as not to attract any unwanted visitors, like the occasional roaming coyote. Once again, as he settled down in his chair, Larry stared into the fire, as if in a trance, contemplating his thoughts churning. Looking at his group, relaxed and full, he asked them if they'd like to hear a tale. Their faces looked filled with excitement as they moved in closer, trying to make sure that they were able to hear. As Larry sat with a smile on his face, his audience was ready and waiting for him to speak. Now, over where we came down from earlier, we passed Lake Washoe. There are many tales from this area. It has a deep and cultural history, Larry said, as his mind kept racing with thoughts about their location within the valley. This area here, now that my grandfather had heard stories told by local native tribes about the mysteries and dangers that it brought to the unskilled traveler. They three campers sat listening intently as he kept talking about the various regional landmarks and the lake, how many different varieties of fish you could catch within it, and the deeper mysteries like UFO sightings and the creepy demon children that roamed the areas. Now, what he was about to tell them might not seem like a scary fairy tale at first, and it might not be of that much interest to you. The tale he was about to tell them was no mere fairy tale. In the stillness of the landscape around them, he began. Now, folks, if you're not into horror or scary tales about mythological beings and monsters, you can go back to your tent if that suits you. Continuing on, Larry spoke about the different paranormal happenings, and the town that he had grown up in, plagued by problems from pestilence to animals going missing. What I want to tell you about is an ancient cryptid, one that not only stalks animals but has been known to stalk people, especially if you venture into its territory. Just then, the old mare let out a snort and seemed restless, as if she sensed something out in the dark beyond the light of the fire. Ah, she's acting a bit skittish, huh? She seemed fine before when I fed her, said Laura. Never mind her, probably just a coyote out in the dark that she caught scent of roaming around. It won't bother us, said Larry. Before Larry could continue, a low moan could be heard in the distance. With it, Laura sat straight up in her chair, with Sandra and Cal looking around behind them. They were all a bit startled, but Cal reassured them it was just a coyote. Larry's eyes lit up as you could almost see the fire's flames flickering within them. Lifted his head slowly, proclaiming, "That could have been a coyote, or it could be. Nah, who am I kidding anyway? Let's get this show on the road, shall we?" The group, settling back into their chairs, looked back to Larry, the flames flickering light as they reflected off of his glasses. There is one tale, a legend actually around here, that started from a small town not far from here. My uncles were out hunting one day, came across a horrific sight, something they regret messing with. As he continued, the three campers sat still, waiting to hear what he was going to say next, though one Laura looked rather pale. It actually caused a real problem for the townsfolk in that town, some time back about around the mid-1940s. Well, said Sandra, her anticipation growing. Now I have to caution you all. There are unseen forces beyond our control that some say you don't want to bring home with you. My grandfather learned this lesson the hard way, and it haunted him to his dying day. Some things should be left alone, and some things need to stay buried. The three campers now sat even closer to the fire, as a sudden and unexpected chill swept through the camp, nearly blowing the fire out. It was almost as if the spirits were also listening to the tale. Now again, if you get scared, you don't have to stay, said Larry, as he looked at each one of their faces for a trace of uncertainty or reluctance. I really want to hear this seriously, though. I'm on the edge of my seat, Sandra says, as she stares back at Larry, waiting for him to spill it and find out what he was talking about in the first place. Well, alrighty then, if you all are really eager, then I'll continue. Have any of you ever heard about the Chupacabra? Their faces dropped, and Laura went completely pale. Another rush of cold wind brushed up against her, causing a spine-tingling feeling of unease. Sandra, who had been the most excited about it, then spoke softly with slight hesitation. "The Chupacabra?" she said as her voice trembled as she slowly uttered the word. Again, this time with more confidence, pretending not to be scared. Larry, realizing that he had their full attention now, seized the opportunity. He knew that he had a tale to tell, and one that would chill them to the core. With the flames flickering within his horn-rimmed glasses, he spoke once again, confirming the nature of his story. "Yes, that is exactly what I want to tell you about within my story tonight, the Chupacabra, and it just so happens that according to legend, roams this very valley." Little did anyone in that group understand that the tour they had decided to join would result in a tall tale. Or is it? I mean, after all, we've come across animals long thought to be mere myth. A low moan heard behind them filled their ears, as once again it was then that Cal had noticed Biddy, the old flea-bitten chestnut mare, had become quite restless. Something had disturbed the old mare, as she pawed her hoof at the ground, trying to run away from whatever had her so bothered. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this video. If you like this, and it has piqued your interest, let me know in the comments and hit like, and subscribe if you would like to hear more narrated content from Bloodlines Chupacabra. Have a really great day, afternoon, or evening, and stay safe out there, folks.